canyon wall, crushing it from forearm up to his hand. Now I want you to stop and imagine this for a second. You survive a fall from the same height as a 7-story building, only to be met with the most excruciating pain that you've ever felt, aka your hand being crushed by an almost half-ton boulder. At first, Aaron went into shock, and also anger, at himself. I mean, he had literally spent the last few months thinking about if he was being too risky in the outdoors, and of course feeling guilty about those lost friendships because of the decisions he'd made and the risks he'd taken in the outdoors, but now he was stuck, and he was paying the full price for that risk that he had taken. He was quite literally in a jam. And so Aaron made a desperate attempt to try and free his arm, right? He pulled, he twisted, he strained himself and his body in any possible way that he could even think of. But despite all this effort, the boulder did not budge one bit. I mean, his arm was basically part of the rock at this point. It was immovable, and as a result, Aaron
shout out to my nigga Biggs.
And this is when the worst realization of all came in, which of course is that nobody knew where Aaron was. Again, it would be one thing if Aaron had left his plans with someone, and therefore rescuers could, zero in on him because they knew where he was going to be hiking, but he hadn't told anyone where he was going. No one was going to be coming for him. Now, if any of this story sounds familiar to some of you, that's because maybe you're starting to recall the famous movie that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And if you have seen that movie, and you do know this story, then, well, you know that things are about to get even worse, if that's even possible, which it is. So Aaron quickly began to kind of assess his situation after trying all these things. He's totally alone, he's miles from civilization, and he only has use of one arm, right? Because the other one's pinned. And so any survival tactics that he needs to do to keep himself alive are now going to just be even more difficult. And it gets worse because he had very limited supplies. Because, as I'm sure you remember, he only packed for an afternoon adventure, right? He didn't have overnight gear with him, and as the sun was beginning to set, Aaron knew that the desert nights out in southern Utah can be brutally cold. He didn't have any warm weather gear. He was literally only wearing a t-shirt and shorts. He tried to chip away at the boulder with his multi-tool knife, but that failed to even make a dent on the rock, and it only made his knife duller. He tried to use his ropes and his harness to rig a pulley system to create even a millimeter of space between his arm and the boulder, but again, this was a failure. The boulder was just too big, too heavy, too perfectly wedged onto his arm. And then a very brief, unrealistic idea came through his head. An idea of how he could potentially free himself. A brutal, bloody, unimaginably painful idea. I think you might know where I'm going with this. But let's shake that off. I mean, that would literally be Aaron's worst case scenario, right? He wasn't going to resort to that. And so instead he opted to just patiently, anxiously wait for a rescue. What else could he possibly do? The first night under the stars, Aaron was left with endless thoughts, and of course with the agonizing pain in his right arm and his hand. And so to get his mind off of all this craziness and anxiety, Aaron made plans to conserve his 1 liter of water and his food. He started to get strategic. He kept his backpack on to shield himself from the cold as best he could, and he spent the night huddled against that canyon wall. By the time the sun rose the next morning, he was exhausted. He obviously didn't sleep since he was standing straight up the entire night. I mean, he couldn't even sit down, right? And he knew that he was going to be there for at least another day, unless, someone miraculously figured out that he was and a rescue team was dispatched, which they didn't, obviously, and they weren't. And so Aaron, being an engineer, came up with one quick solution to the ending problem. He rigged his harness to suspend himself and take the weight off of his legs, essentially creating a seat. And this allowed him to kind of lean back. Even though he could only do this in 20-minute intervals because of how the harness reduced blood flow to his legs, this was still a win, right? I mean, certainly his first win since this situation started. The next few days went kind of like this for Aaron. A few tiny wins as he figured out how to survive and keep his odds of rescue above 0%. But mostly
You don't have to be a VIP to get more than just savings with Geico. Every customer gets 24/7 fast-friendly claim support.
Could I get a picture?
Yeah, it's not like you run into animal celebrities every day.
Stop. It's just a bug. Stop.
Get more than just savings. Get more with Geico.
There are places no cell network can reach. That's why T-Mobile now has a cell network with over 600 dedicated satellites that automatically connect to your phone. So join T-Mobile and drop me a text saying you won't believe where I am.
This is a meal, a tender Italian steak and mozza sandwich soda with can't stop saying focaccia meal.
Focaccia. 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 Focaccia.
Gotcha.
Focaccia.
Focaccia. Try the new Italian steak and mozza sandwich. It just feels good at Panera.
The only guarantee you have is that you are going to die. Every moment matters. So long is the answer.
Our game changer for sleep that stays is here. Garlic Fructis Sleep and Stay Serum. Shake it.
A lot of pain and hopelessness. He continued to chip away at the boulder and to try to pry his arm free, but his efforts were always fruitless. The burritos and the chocolate that he was taking with him obviously didn't last very long. His water supply, though carefully rationed, was diminishing fast. And the long days and the cold nights were starting to cause him not only physical stress, but severe mental stress. I mean, can you imagine this? The only thing that he had that wasn't a total bummer for Aaron was his camcorder, which he used to document his experience, tell stories, and even leave messages for his loved ones. I don't know how much this helped, but it at least kept him a little bit entertained. But towards the end of day 4, we're now 96 hours stuck at this point, and no sign of a rescue team. Aaron looked at his arm, and a new fear entered his mind. His arm was quickly losing circulation. I mean, it wasn't just swelling, it was like turning black and becoming a source of intense, throbbing agony. The tissue was dying, and he knew what that meant. Infection. Infection was now a looming threat, and with it came the potential for sepsis, and even death, which it's not like starvation or dehydration are pleasant ways to go, but from my limited knowledge, sepsis is probably worse. The canyons, which used to be this place of comfort and soul searching for Aaron throughout his life, had now essentially become his tomb. And so he recorded a final video message on his camcorder to say goodbye to his family and acknowledge the love that he had for all of them. I mean, you gotta remember, he'd spent most of his time stuck here thinking about them and about, of course, his own life. Things like what he had accomplished, his regrets. I'm sure he thought about that avalanche, the 14ers that he wouldn't be able to climb now, and I'm sure he thought about his friends, and his former friends, who he had kind of fallen out with. I mean, would they even care if he died? Should he have let someone know that he was leaving? Why was there no one out there searching for him? All these questions are running through his head. During some moments, he even considered ending his own life, before he met an even worse and more painful end. I mean, this was all just too much. But instead of his brain staying on all of those thoughts long term, delirium ended up kicking in. A combination of little water and food, total exhaustion, and of course the relentless pain of his arm. Well, all of this stuff combined, and Aaron started to hallucinate. One of these hallucinations was particularly powerful. Aaron had this vision of a little boy. Not just any little boy, by the way, but a child who he felt was his future son. And in this moment, a switch kind of flipped inside of his head. He realized that the hallucination was of a future that he desperately wanted to live to see. Really, this is the kind of thinking that Aaron's former friends had been wanting him to arrive at in order to take less risks in his life. This hallucination, this vision, could not have come at a better time, because now Aaron's mind was fighting for survival despite the fact that his body was failing him. By the end of day 5, the situation was beyond dire. His water was now completely gone, and so he was drinking urine, which is generally a bad idea, not just because it's gross, but because I guess it could potentially poison your liver. I don't know, don't do that. His arm, of course, was just dead weight at this point. It was decomposing, and it was likely already infected. He was hypothermic after spending 5 nights braving the elements with no warm gear. He knew with absolute certainty that he was going to die in that canyon within just a day or two if he didn't do something drastic. All attempts to free himself from the boulder had failed. He had tried every conventional option, but there was still one more option that he had not tried yet. And again, I think you know where I'm going with this. Do you remember that little unimaginable idea I mentioned earlier? The one that Aaron thought was too brutal and too bloody and frankly out of the question back on well,
Man,
that thought,
cut his arm
which had
off.
been kind of flickering in and out of his mind since the beginning, kind of solidified